6 months after humanity stopped holding back, the galaxy had learned to live with a new reality. The old order of competing empires and threatened smaller species was gone, replaced by something that no one had expected: genuine peace enforced by overwhelming human superiority. Ambassador. G1 Ryu walked through the halls of the newly constructed Galactic Security Council headquarters. Unlike the old council chambers where smaller species sat in the back, while major powers dominated the front, this facility was designed with equality in mind. Every species had the same voice, the same vote, and the same protection. Ryu was a diplomat by training, but a realist by experience. She had spent years watching the old council fail to protect innocent civilizations because the major powers found it inconvenient. Now she had the tools to ensure that would never happen again. The Altarian trade dispute has been resolved, her aide reported. Both sides accepted human arbitration rather than risk economic warfare. And the Nexus shipping lanes? Ryu asked. Completely clear of pirates for the first time in 3 centuries, came the reply. General Han's patrol fleets have a perfect deterrent record. No one wants to test human enforcement capabilities. General Wu Jin Han commanded the Human Defense Force, which had become the galaxy's de facto peacekeeping organization. Han was a practical man who preferred prevention to punishment. His fleets maintained peace not through aggression, but through the certain knowledge that any return to the old ways would be met with swift, overwhelming response. The key is visibility, Han was explaining to his senior commanders in their weekly briefing. We want every potential aggressor to know we're watching. We want every threatened species to know we're protecting them. Peace through strength only works when everyone understands the strength is real. His displays showed human patrol routes that covered every inhabited system in the galaxy, ships that could reach any location within hours, communication networks that monitored all military activity in real time. Sir, one of his officers reported, we're receiving requests for permanent protection agreements from 47 more systems this week. That brings the total to over 3,000. Han nodded. This was exactly what Earth's planners had hoped for. Instead of ruling through conquest, humanity was protecting through invitation. Species that had lived in fear for generations were voluntarily placing themselves under human security guarantees. Dr. Young-Mi Cho was running the most unexpected program in human space: rehabilitation services for former aggressors. Her facility on the moon of Titan had become home to thousands of former Vorthak officers, pirate leaders, and military commanders from species that had terrorized their neighbors. We don't want subjects or enemies, she was explaining to a group of former Vorthak generals. We want neighbors who understand that strength serves peace, not conquest. The rehabilitation program was proving surprisingly successful. Aggressive species, it turned out, were often driven by fear and insecurity as much as by desire for power. When that fear was removed by human protection, many former enemies became valuable allies. General Krex has requested assignment to the reconstruction teams on Quillen Prime, one of Cho's assistants reported. He wants to help rebuild what his forces destroyed. It was a remarkable transformation. The same Vorthak leader who had laughed at human warnings was now working alongside his former victims, protected by human security guarantees that let former enemies cooperate without fear. Captain Subin Zhang was leading a very different kind of mission at the edge of known space. Her advanced scouts had detected something that changed everything: signals from outside the galaxy. Something was coming, and it wasn't friendly. Long range. Sensors are picking up massive energy signatures, she reported to Admiral Choi on Earth. Whatever's out there makes our old enemies look like children playing with toys. The external threat was exactly what humanity's strategic planners had prepared for. Earth's leaders had always known that the real test wouldn't be defeating galactic civilizations, but protecting the galaxy from threats that those civilizations couldn't handle. Commander Do-Hyun Kim stood before the assembled representatives of every species in the galaxy. The chamber was larger now, accommodating hundreds of civilizations that had never had a voice in galactic affairs. His hair was completely gray now, but his voice was as steady as ever. Citizens of the galaxy, he began, we face a threat from beyond our borders. Long-range reconnaissance has detected an invasion force approaching from dark space. Based on initial analysis, this force possesses technology and numbers that exceed anything in our current experience. The chamber was dead silent. After months of peace under human protection, The idea of a threat that even humans couldn't easily handle was terrifying. However, Kim continued, this is exactly the situation we have been preparing for. Not just humanity, but all of us together. The displays around the chamber lit up with images that took everyone's breath away. Combined fleets from dozens of species, using technology that blended the best innovations from across the galaxy. Fortech engineering enhanced with human quantum physics. Zephyrian computational power integrated with Mindari telepathic coordination. Quillen artistic sensibilities applied to strategic planning. 6 months ago, we were enemies and victims, Kim said. Today, we are allies and protectors. The force approaching our galaxy will face not just human military power, but the combined strength of every civilization that chooses to stand together. The response was immediate and unanimous. Species after species stood to pledge their forces to the common defense. Even former aggressors who had once terrorized their neighbors now volunteered to protect those same neighbors from external threat. Captain Jae-min Lee watched the unity from his flagship, now designated as the command vessel for the combined galactic fleet. The same exploration ship that had once pretended to be helpless was now coordinating the largest military alliance in galactic history. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving force commitments from every inhabited system. Even the most isolated species are contributing what they can. Lee smiled. This was what humanity had really been working toward all along. Not domination, but unity. Not conquest, but cooperation. The external threat was dangerous, but it had accomplished something that 50 years of diplomacy couldn't. It had made the entire galaxy truly united for the first time in history. The battle at the Galactic Rim lasted 3 days. The external invaders brought weapons that could destroy stars and shields that seemed invulnerable to conventional attack. But they had made the same mistake that galactic species had made when facing humanity. They had underestimated their opponents. The combined galactic fleet used tactics that no single species could have developed. Human stealth technology allowed Vorthak assault troops to board enemy vessels. Zephyrian hacking systems infected invader networks while Mindari telepaths coordinated fleet movements instantaneously. Quillen engineers provided creative solutions to technical problems that surprised even human scientists. When the invasion was finally repelled, the external force retreated back into dark space, carrying with them a new understanding of what they had encountered. This galaxy was no longer a collection of competing civilizations ripe for conquest. It had become something new, a unified community capable of defending itself against any threat. Commander Kim stood on the observation deck of the defense station at the Galactic Rim, watching the combined fleet patrol the borders that had once been undefended. Beside him, representatives from dozens of species worked together with an efficiency that would have been impossible under the old system. 10 years ago, I was tending gardens on New Quillen, Kim said to Dr. So-Young Park, who had joined him for the ceremony marking the first anniversary of galactic unification, the first world liberated by human forces. A reporter asked me why humanity had held back for so long. What did you tell them? Park asked. That the best victory is the one your enemy chooses for themselves, Kim replied. We gave the galaxy every chance to choose peace. When they chose war instead, we honored their choice with overwhelming superiority, and when they learned the consequences, they chose peace again. But this time as equals, not as conquered subjects. Below them, the newest addition to the galactic fleet was taking its position in the patrol formation. It was a ship built with technology from 20 different species, crewed by volunteers from across the galaxy, and commanded by a former Vorthak officer who had learned that protecting others was more satisfying than conquering them. This is what we fought for, Kim continued. A galaxy where strength serves life, not death. Where the powerful protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Where different species can work together because they're not afraid of each other. Admiral Zhang, formerly Captain Zhang, was patrolling the outer system when her sensors detected new contacts at the edge of detection range. For a moment, her crew tensed, preparing for another external threat. But these signals were different. They were exploration vessels from a neighboring galaxy, approaching cautiously and broadcasting peaceful intentions. First contact with an entirely new group of civilizations, handled not by a single species, but by the combined diplomatic core of the unified galaxy. The galaxy was reeling. In less than a week, humanity had dismantled military forces that had dominated space for centuries. But the shock of human military capabilities was nothing compared to what came next. The revelation of just how long humanity had been planning for this moment. Professor Chan Wu. Lim stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, holding a datapad that contained information that would shake every government to its core. Lim was an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle voice, the kind of person you would trust to teach your children history, which made what he was about to reveal even more terrifying. Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed beings of the Council, Lim began softly, I have been asked to present the historical context for recent human military actions. What I am about to share may disturb you. The chamber was packed with delegates from every major civilization. Even species that rarely left their home systems had sent representatives. Everyone wanted to understand how humanity had hidden such overwhelming military superiority for 50 years. When humans first made contact with galactic civilization, we spent 2 years studying your history before requesting admission to the Council. Lim continued. We discovered a pattern that greatly concerned our leaders. Every few centuries, a militaristic species would rise to dominance, conquer or intimidate smaller civilizations, and rule through fear until another power challenged them. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. We observed that peaceful species rarely survived long without protection from stronger allies. And we noted that the protection offered by major powers often came with strings attached: economic dependence, territorial concessions, or cultural submission. Lim activated his datapad, and holographic displays filled the chamber with information that made several delegates gasp in shock. These are classified Earth documents from our first diplomatic mission 50 years ago. I have been authorized to share them today. The documents show detailed analysis of galactic power structures, military capabilities, trade routes, and political weaknesses. But what stunned the chamber was the date on the files. They had been created before humanity even applied for Council membership. By the time we requested admission to the Council, we had already identified every major threat in the galaxy, Lim said. We knew exactly which species were likely to become aggressive, which territories they would target, and what methods they would use. Captain Heiwan Seo was watching the Council session from her command ship in deep space. She commanded humanity's reconnaissance fleet, ships that had been gathering intelligence across the galaxy for decades while pretending to be simple exploration vessels. Every human exploration mission was also a spy mission, she was explaining to her senior officers. Every trade delegation carried intelligence specialists. Every cultural exchange included military analysts. We've been watching and learning for 50 years. Her displays showed the true scope of human intelligence operations, monitoring stations disguised as research outposts, communication intercepts from every major government, detailed maps of military installations across hundreds of star systems. The aliens thought they were dealing with naive newcomers, Seo continued. They shared their technology freely, invited us to tour their facilities, and discussed their military strategies openly. They never imagined we were cataloging everything for future use. Back on Nexus Prime, Professor Lim was revealing even more shocking information. We identified the Vorthak Empire as the most likely threat within a 20-year time frame, he said, showing detailed projections that had proven remarkably accurate. We predicted they would begin with expansion into the Outer Rim, followed by systematic intimidation of smaller species. The Vorthak delegation was notably absent from the session. Most of their senior leadership was currently in human custody awaiting war crimes trials. We also identified secondary threats, Lim continued. Species that might opportunistically attack if they perceived human weakness. Pirates and raiders who would test our defenses. Even potential alliance patterns among major powers who might unite against a rising human threat. Dr. Dong Hyun Bai had spent his career studying predator species and their behavioral patterns. He was a quiet man who preferred laboratory work to public speaking, but his research had been crucial to human survival planning. Aggressive species follow predictable patterns, Bai was explaining to Earth's Leadership Council. They test boundaries gradually, looking for signs of weakness. They exploit diplomatic channels while preparing military options. They always underestimate enemies they perceive as peaceful. His studies had shaped humanity's entire strategy. By appearing diplomatically weak while secretly preparing overwhelming force, Humans had encouraged their enemies to reveal their intentions and capabilities while remaining completely unprepared for effective resistance. The most interesting discovery was how rigid their thinking had become. Bay continued. Advanced civilizations had fallen into patterns that made them predictable. They had stopped innovating because their current methods worked against known threats. Meanwhile, the galaxy was discovering just how innovative human methods had become. The Zephyrian Collective, which prided itself on technological superiority, was dealing with the aftermath of complete network infiltration by human cyber warfare specialists. Ha-Yoon Kim was only 19 years old, but she had led the team that cracked Zephyrian quantum encryption. She was Commander Do-Hyun Kim's daughter, inheriting her father's strategic mind and adding her generation's intuitive understanding of digital warfare. Their security was actually pretty good by their standards. Ha-Yoon was explaining to her team of teenage hackers, but they designed it to stop other aliens, not humans. They never considered attack vectors that we considered obvious. Her screen showed the results of human cyber operations across Zephyrian space. Military communications redirected. Defense systems temporarily disabled. Economic networks monitored in real time. All done so subtly that the Zephyrians didn't realize it was happening until human forces announced it publicly. The funny part is, we didn't steal anything or cause any permanent damage, Ha-Yoon continued. We just proved we could access anything we wanted anytime we wanted. That's more terrifying to them than actual destruction. The Mindari Federation was facing an even more disturbing revelation. Their telepathic abilities, which had given them dominance over other species for millennia, were completely useless against humans. Dr. Jin-Soo Park, no relation to Dr. So-Young Park, had led the development of human mental defenses. His work combined neuroscience, quantum physics, and techniques borrowed from human meditation traditions. Telepathy operates on specific frequency ranges. Dr. Park was explaining to a gathering of human psyop specialists. Once we understood the mechanism, developing countermeasures was straightforward. But we went beyond just defense. Human psyops teams had developed the ability to reflect telepathic attacks back at their sources. Mindari agents attempting to read human thoughts found their own minds overwhelmed by feedback loops that left them catatonic. We learned that telepathic species become dependent on their abilities. Park continued. When those abilities are neutralized, they're actually more vulnerable than non-telepathic species, because they've never learned to function without that advantage. Professor Lim was concluding his presentation to the Galactic Council with the most shocking revelation of all. Every human colony that reported pirate attacks or raiders was actually part of our intelligence network, he said calmly. We allowed these attacks to continue because they provided valuable information about criminal organizations and potential military threats. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Human colonies had been serving as bait, gathering intelligence while their people suffered, all as part of a galactic strategy that spanned decades. Our people volunteered for these missions, Lim added quickly, seeing the horror on alien faces. They knew the risks and believed in the greater purpose. Many of them are here today, proud of their contribution to galactic security. Captain Jamin Lee was one of those volunteers. His exploration missions had deliberately taken him into dangerous territory, gathering information while maintaining his cover as a peaceful researcher. We knew the galaxy was dangerous, Lee was telling his crew. We also knew that the only way to survive was to understand that danger completely. Every human who served in alien space was part of that understanding. The session ended with Professor Lim's final statement. Humanity spent 50 years preparing for this conflict, while hoping it would never come. We gave the galaxy every opportunity to choose peace. When war was forced upon us, we were ready. As delegates filed out of the chamber, they carried with them a new understanding of their human neighbors. This wasn't a species that had suddenly developed advanced technology. This was a species that had been quietly studying, planning, and preparing since their first day in galactic civilization. The question now was what humanity would do with the overwhelming advantage they had revealed. The galaxy had learned that humans were far more capable than anyone had imagined. Soon they would learn whether humans were as benevolent as they claimed to be. 3 weeks had passed since the warning at Nexus Prime. The Vorthak Empire had kept their promise, and it was even worse than anyone expected. Dr. So-Young Park stared at the images on her screen with horror and rage. The Quillen home system was burning. Vorthak War ships hung in space like metal vultures while smaller craft moved between the silver-skinned people's cities. But this wasn't just conquest. It was slavery. The Quillens who survived the initial attack were being loaded onto transport ships. Families were torn apart as the strong were taken for manual labor, and the weak were left to die. Children cried for parents they would never see again. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were being stripped of anything valuable. The galactic news networks are calling it a police action, Park said to Commander Do-Hyun Kim. Her voice was bitter. They're saying the Quillens were hiding weapons and threatened regional stability. Do-Hyun watched the footage without speaking. His hands were clenched into fists, but his face remained calm. This was exactly what Earth's leaders had predicted when they first made contact with the galaxy. The strong took what they wanted and everyone else made excuses for them. What about the council? Do-Hyun asked. Emergency session tomorrow, Park replied. The Zephyrians are calling for measured response. The Mindari want to study the situation further. The smaller species are terrified into silence. On the other side of known space, Admiral Tae-Woo Choi was having a very different kind of meeting. Deep inside Earth's moon, in chambers that no alien had ever seen, the Global Defense Council was gathering. Admiral Choi was an older man with silver hair and scars on his hands from his youth as a fighter pilot. He had spent 30 years preparing for this day, hoping it would never come. Now he stood before holographic displays showing the true extent of Earth's military power. Ladies and gentlemen, he said to the assembled leaders, it's time to show them what we've really been building. The displays lit up with images that would have shocked any alien observer. Massive shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, weapons testing facilities disguised as research stations, entire fleets of advanced warships that had been built in secret over decades. We have 47 Dreadnought-class vessels fully operational, Admiral Choi reported. Each one could take on a Vorthak battle group alone. We have over 300 cruisers using technology that the galaxy thinks is impossible, and we have resources they can't even imagine. Defense Minister Young Soo-han leaned forward in his chair. He was a political leader, not a soldier, but he understood the weight of what they were discussing. How many people know about this? He asked. Outside this room? Maybe 2,000 across all projects, Choi replied. We've been very careful. As far as the galaxy knows, Earth has a small defensive fleet and some exploration ships. They think we're farmers and scientists playing at being spacers. President Min Jung-lee, no relation to Captain Jae-min Lee, spoke from the head of the table. She was a small woman with iron in her voice. What about our people living in alien territories? She asked. Human colonies, trade missions, diplomatic posts, already evacuating under cover of routine rotation, Admiral Choi said. Our intelligence network has been preparing for months. Every human civilian will be safely in our space within the week. The room fell silent as the leaders absorbed this information. Earth had an intelligence network. Earth had been evacuating people. Earth had been preparing for war while pretending to pursue peace. How long have we been planning this? Minister Han asked quietly. Since first contact, President Lee replied. We learned our history lessons well. Never again would humanity be caught unprepared by a more powerful enemy. Meanwhile, in space near the ruined Quillen system, Lieutenant Eun-ji-nam was learning just how unprepared their enemies were. Nam was aboard the stealth ship Retribution, one of Earth's most advanced vessels. To any alien sensors, her ship looked like empty space. But Nam could see everything. Vorthak fleet movements, communication signals, even the personal messages that Vorthak officers sent to their families. They're not even trying to hide their next targets, she reported to her captain. 3 more systems in the next month. They think no one can stop them. Engineer Boram Yoon was working at her station fine-tuning the ship's experimental weapons. Yoon was young for her position, but she had helped design systems that bent the rules of physics as the galaxy understood them. Captain, Yoon said, I'm reading energy signatures from at least 12 human colonies that are under threat. The Vorthak aren't the only ones moving. Other species are starting to think humans are easy targets too. This was the news that Admiral Choi had been expecting. Predators could smell weakness, and humanity's diplomatic protests had been seen as exactly that. Weakness. Back on Nexus Prime, Commander Do-Hyun Kim was making one final attempt at peace. The emergency council session was even more frustrating than he had expected. The Zephyrian representative, a tall insect creature with 4 arms, was explaining why immediate action was impossible. The Vorthak expansion falls within established territorial rights. It clicked in its mechanical voice. The council cannot interfere with internal empire matters. Do-hyun stood up slowly. Around the chamber, aliens who had laughed at his warning 3 weeks ago were now avoiding his eyes. Internal matters? Do-hyun asked. The enslavement of an entire species is an internal matter. The Mindari delegate, a pale figure whose thoughts were unreadable, spoke without moving its lips. Its words appeared directly in everyone's mind. The Mindari Federation believes that hasty action leads to greater conflict. We suggest monitoring the situation and providing humanitarian aid where possible. Humanitarian aid, Do-hyun repeated. You want to send food and medicine to people being loaded onto slave ships. General Krex was sitting in the Vorthak section, looking pleased with himself. The massive reptilian warrior had grown even more confident since his easy victory over the Quillans. The soft species complain too much, Krex said. Perhaps if humans focused on building strength instead of filing complaints, they would not need to fear the strong. That was when Do-hyun Kim made the decision that would change galactic history. The human species formally withdraws from the Galactic Non-Aggression Accords, he said clearly. As of this moment, we are no longer bound by Council military limitations. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. The Non-Aggression Accords were the foundation of galactic law. They prevented smaller species from building large military forces, supposedly to maintain peace. Furthermore, Do-hyun continued, his voice cutting through the noise, we are withdrawing from all Council oversight of human military development and deployment. General Krex stood up, his massive form towering over the chamber. You declare war on the galaxy, little mammal? Do-hyun looked directly at the Vorthak general. We warned you we were holding back. You chose not to listen. This is our final diplomatic message. With that, Do-hyun Kim walked out of the chamber. Dr. Park followed him, carrying a small device that had been recording everything. As they headed back to their ship, Park activated her communication equipment. Within minutes, human colonies across the galaxy were receiving the same message. To any species currently threatening human territories or our allies, you have 24 hours to withdraw all military forces. This is not a negotiation. This is not a bluff. You have been warned. The message was sent on every frequency in every known language. It reached Vorthak commanders planning attacks on human worlds. It reached pirates who had been raiding human trade ships. It reached every alien leader who thought humanity was too weak to fight back. Most of them laughed when they received it. Captain Jamin Lee was on the bridge of the Harmony when the 24-hour countdown began. His ship was no longer pretending to be a simple exploration vessel. Hidden weapon systems were powering up. Stealth fields were activating. And all around him, space was beginning to fill with ships that hadn't been there moments before. Sir, his communications officer said, we're receiving responses to the ultimatum. What kind of responses? Lee asked. The printable ones mostly involve suggestions about what humans can do with their threats, she replied. Lee nodded grimly. Then they've made their choice. Signal the fleet. Operation Freedom begins in 24 hours. Across the galaxy, the final hours of peace were ticking away. Alien leaders were dismissing human threats as the desperate bluster of a weak species. They had no idea that while they had been building their empires and playing their political games, humanity had been preparing for this exact moment. The warning had been ignored. Now came the consequences. The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. Inside its gleaming halls, representatives from hundreds of alien species gathered for another meeting of the Galactic Council. Commander Do-hyun Kim walked through the corridors, his blue Earth uniform standing out among the colorful robes and strange armor of the other delegates. Do-hyun had been Earth's voice in the galaxy for 10 years now. He was a tall man with graying hair and calm eyes that had seen many battles before humans ever left their home planet. Today felt different, though. There was tension in the air that made his old soldier instincts wake up. Dr. So-young Park fell into step beside him. She was younger than Do-hyun, with sharp intelligence behind her glasses. As Earth's chief expert on alien cultures, she could read the mood of other species better than anyone. The Vorthak are planning something big, she whispered. I can see it in how their delegates are acting. They keep looking at the smaller species like hungry wolves. Do-hyun nodded. The Vorthak Empire had been growing more aggressive each year. They were a warrior race that looked like walking lizards covered in thick scales. Their leader, General Krex, believed that might made right. The only thing that had kept them in check was the balance of power with two other major forces in the galaxy. The Zephyrian Collective was a group of insect-like beings who relied on advanced technology. The Mindari Federation was made up of tall, pale humanoids who could read minds. These three powers had divided the galaxy between them for centuries, with smaller species like humans existing in the spaces between. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in circles that rose toward a domed ceiling. Du-hyun took his place in the section reserved for minor species, a term that always made him smile grimly. If only they knew. General Krex stood up, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. His voice was like grinding stone when he spoke. The Vorthak Empire claims the Outer Rim territories, he announced. These empty worlds will serve the strong as nature intended. Murmurs of shock rippled through the chamber. The Outer Rim wasn't empty at all. Dozens of peaceful civilizations lived there, most of them still learning to travel between stars. They had no way to defend themselves against Vorthak war fleets. A delegate from the Quillen system stood up. The Quillens looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin. Their representative's voice shook as he spoke. Those worlds are our homes. We have families there, cities, farms. We've never hurt anyone. Please, you can't just take everything we've built. General Krex laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Weak prey species have no rights. The strong take what they need. This is the way of the universe. Other small species began protesting, but their voices were lost in the noise. The three major powers just watched. The Zephyrians seemed interested in what technology they might gain from new territories. The Mindari appeared to be having silent conversations with their telepathy. None of them cared about the small civilizations that would be destroyed. Du-hyun felt anger building in his chest. This was exactly what humanity had feared when they first made contact with the galaxy 50 years ago. Earth had been lucky. They were discovered by a peaceful exploration ship, not by conquerors. But Earth's leaders knew that luck wouldn't last forever. The chamber was getting louder as more species argued. Finally, Do-hyun stood up. His movement was smooth and controlled, like a predator rising to hunt. The noise died down as beings turned to look at the human representative. The Earth delegation formally objects to this expansion, Do-hyun said. His voice carried clearly through the chamber without shouting. The Galactic Council's own laws protect developing civilizations from aggression. General Krex turned his yellow eyes toward Do-hyun. The Vorthak's mouth opened to show rows of sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. Another soft species playing at diplomacy, Krex said. Humans are barely better than the prey we hunt. You've been in space for only 50 years. Your homeworld has no real defenses. Perhaps we should add Earth to our expansion plans. The threat hung in the air like poison. Do-hyun could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him, waiting to see how humanity would respond to being challenged by one of the galaxy's great powers. Do-hyun stepped forward. His movements were still calm, but something had changed in his posture. Dr. Park, who knew him well, recognized the shift. This was no longer a diplomat speaking. This was a soldier. General Krex, Do-hyun said quietly. We've spent 50 years showing you our diplomatic face because we believed in peaceful coexistence. We've held back our true nature out of respect for galactic stability. The chamber had gone completely silent now. Even the telepathic Mindari seemed to be listening instead of having their private conversations. This is your warning, Do-hyun continued. Do not mistake our restraint for weakness. For a moment, General Krex looked uncertain. There was something in the human's tone that didn't match his species' reputation. But then the moment passed, and Krex threw back his massive head and laughed. Threats from mammals, he roared. This grows funnier by the moment. What will you do, human? Send us angry messages? File complaints with the council? The other Vorthak delegates joined in the laughter. Soon, representatives from other species were chuckling too. Even some of the smaller civilizations seemed amused by the idea of humans challenging the mighty Vorthak Empire. Do-hyun didn't react to the mockery. He simply stood there, watching and remembering every face that laughed at humanity's warning. Dr. Park was taking careful notes, recording which species found human threats amusing. High above the chamber, Captain Jamin Lee watched the proceedings from his ship, the exploration vessel Harmony. He was a compact man with steady hands and the kind of calm focus that came from years of dangerous missions. Right now, his ship was officially on a research expedition near Nexus Prime. Lee's communication officer turned to him with a questioning look. The young woman had been monitoring Earth command frequencies, waiting for new orders. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth," she reported. Lee read the message on his personal screen. 3 simple words that would change everything. Prepare Protocol 7. Lee had hoped he would never see those words. He had trained for this scenario, but part of him had believed it would never be necessary. Humanity had worked so hard to build peaceful relationships with the galaxy. "Acknowledge the message," Lee said quietly, "and send word to all ships. Tell them it's time." Back in the council chamber, the session was ending. General Krex had announced that Vorthak fleets would begin moving toward the outer rim within the week. The council had voted to monitor the situation, which everyone knew meant they would do nothing. Do-hyun walked out of the chamber with Dr. Park beside him. She could see the sadness in his expression. "They had their chance," she said softly. "Yes," Do-hyun replied. 50 years of chances. We tried so hard to make this work." As they headed back to their ship, neither of them noticed the small device Dr. Park had left behind. Hidden in the chamber's walls, it would record everything that happened in the coming weeks. When the galaxy finally understood what humanity truly was, they would want to know exactly how it all began. The warning had been given. Soon the galaxy would learn what happened when you ignored it. The 24 hours ended with laughter echoing across alien communication networks. General Krex had made a public broadcast, announcing that Vorthak fleets were moving toward human colonies to teach the upstart mammals their place in the galaxy. Other species were making similar announcements, sensing opportunity in what they saw as human weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. Colonel Minho, Song crouched in the shadows of a Vorthak slave processing center on the 3rd moon of the Quillen system. Around him, his strike team moved like ghosts through enemy positions. To Vorthak sensors, they simply didn't exist. Song was a lean man with steady hands and eyes that missed nothing. He had trained for this kind of mission his entire adult life, but seeing the reality of alien slavery made his blood burn with cold anger. Below them, Quillen families were being separated, children torn from their parents' arms. "Team leaders report," Song whispered into his communication device. "Alpha team in position," came the reply. "Enemy command center located and surrounded." "Beta team ready," said another voice. "Prisoner transport ships are isolated." Song smiled grimly. The Vorthak had built their facility assuming no one could challenge them. Their defenses were designed to keep slaves in, not to keep human special forces out. "All teams execute," Song ordered. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations. The Vorthak guards simply started falling asleep at their posts. Security systems began showing false readings. Communication networks went silent. Within 30 minutes, the entire facility was under human control, and the Vorthak never even knew they were under attack. The stunned Quillen prisoners watched in amazement as armored figures appeared from nowhere, speaking in gentle voices and offering medical aid. The humans moved with impossible efficiency, processing thousands of freed slaves and preparing them for evacuation. General Krex himself was commanding the Vorthak fleet that was supposed to destroy human colonies. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator, feeling confident about crushing the soft mammals who dared to threaten him. Long-range sensors show human ships approaching. His tactical officer reported, "Single light cruiser. They're either very brave or very stupid." Krex laughed. "One ship against my entire battle fleet. This will be over quickly." The human ship was the experimental fighter craft Wraith, piloted by Captain Subin Jong. Jong was a small woman with incredibly quick reflexes and an understanding of physics that amazed even human scientists. She was about to demonstrate just how advanced human technology had become. "Wraith to Vorthak fleet." Jang's voice came over the communication channels. "You have been ordered to withdraw. This is your final warning." Krex's laughter boomed across his bridge. "One small ship threatens my entire fleet? You mammals are even more foolish than I thought. All weapons target that craft and destroy it." Dozens of Vorthak warships opened fire. Energy beams and explosive missiles filled space where the human fighter had been. When the light faded, empty space remained. "Where did it go?" Krex demanded. His answer came when the Wraith materialized inside his ship's hangar bay. Jang had simply phased through the hull as if it didn't exist. Emergency alarms began screaming throughout the ship as human infiltration teams appeared on every deck. "How is this possible?" Krex roared. "No technology can phase through our armor." Dr. Yejin Kang could have answered that question. She was the chief scientist of the Prometheus Project, humanity's most classified research program. For 50 years, her teams had been studying every piece of alien technology they could acquire, reverse engineering it, improving it, and then developing entirely new concepts that alien science considered impossible. Phase technology was actually simple once we understood quantum mechanics properly. Dr. Kang was explaining to a room full of Earth's top military leaders. The aliens never developed it because they were too focused on building stronger armor and bigger weapons. On her screens, she could watch human forces across the galaxy, demonstrating technologies that should not have existed, ships that could bend space-time to appear anywhere instantly, weapons that ignored energy shields by operating on different physical principles, soldiers with personal stealth fields that made them invisible to any known sensor. "How long have we been developing this?" asked one of the generals. "Since first contact," Dr. Kang replied. Every diplomatic mission was also a research mission. Every trade agreement included technology sharing. Every cultural exchange gave us new scientific data. The aliens thought they were teaching primitive humans about advanced science. They never realized we were learning everything they knew and then improving on it. Back in the Quillen system, Colonel Song was leading the liberation of the main slave world. Vorthak ground forces that had never faced serious resistance found themselves fighting enemies they couldn't see or track. Human soldiers appeared from nowhere, disabled enemy equipment with impossible precision, and vanished before counterattacks could be organized. The Vorthak military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and intimidation. They had never learned how to fight an enemy that refused to stand still and get shot at. Within hours, their impregnable positions were falling one after another. But what shocked the galaxy most was not how effectively humans fought, but how they fought. Colonel Song's teams used non-lethal weapons whenever possible. Vorthak soldiers found themselves stunned unconscious rather than killed. Enemy equipment was disabled rather than destroyed. Medical teams followed the combat units, treating wounded enemies alongside freed slaves. "Sir," one of Song's lieutenants reported, "we've captured General Krex. What are your orders?" Song looked at the massive Vorthak general who had been terrorizing the galaxy for decades. Krex was conscious but restrained, his yellow eyes filled with confusion and rage. "Process him according to Galactic war crimes protocols," Song said calmly. "Make sure he's treated humanely. We're not here for revenge, we're here for justice." The speed and precision of human military operations was stunning even other human commanders. Admiral Tae-Woo Choi watched from Earth's command center as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Vorthak fleet in the Kepler system, neutralized without casualties. Pirate base in the Centauri region, captured intact with all personnel. Arrested. Raider groups threatening. The Tau Ceti colonies disappeared completely. No trace found. Dr. So-Young Park was coordinating the information war alongside the military operations. Her teams were broadcasting everything to the galactic news networks. Footage of freed slaves, recordings of human forces using minimal violence, interviews with liberated populations. "We need the galaxy to understand this isn't conquest," she explained to her communication teams. "Every action we take needs to show that we're protecting the innocent, not expanding territory." The message was getting through. Across hundreds of worlds, smaller species were watching in amazement as humanity dismantled oppressive forces that had threatened them for generations. The same humans who had seemed so weak in diplomatic meetings were systematically defeating every military force that challenged them. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session. Representatives who had laughed at human warnings 3 weeks ago were now watching their military forces disappear from sensor screens across the galaxy. The Zephyrian delegates' forearms were shaking as it tried to process reports from its own territory. Human cyber warfare specialists have infiltrated our most secure networks. They're treating our quantum encryption like children's puzzles. The Mindari representative had gone completely silent. For the first time in recorded history, a telepathic Mindari couldn't read human thoughts. Worse, human PsyOps specialists seemed to be turning telepathic attacks back on their users, leaving Mindari agents catatonic. "This is impossible," whispered the delegate from the Rigel Consortium. "Humans have been in space for only 50 years. How do they have technology that surpasses civilizations that are thousands of years old?" The answer was sitting in Earth's archives, in the personal logs of humanity's first diplomatic team. Commander Do-Hyun Kim had written it himself after the very first contact with alien civilization. "They are more advanced than us in many ways, but they have grown complacent. They see technology as a tool for maintaining power, not for solving problems. They have forgotten how to innovate, how to adapt, how to think differently about challenges. This may be our greatest advantage. They will teach us everything they know, never imagining that we might improve on it." Captain Jamin Lee's ship, the Harmony, appeared in orbit around the Vorthak homeworld. The planet's orbital defenses, supposedly the strongest in the galaxy, couldn't even detect his presence. Lee sent a simple message to the Vorthak government. "General Krex has been arrested for war crimes. All Vorthak military forces are ordered to stand down immediately. Any further acts of aggression will result in the complete neutralization of your military capabilities. You have 1 hour to comply." The Vorthak Home Defense Fleet launched to attack this single human ship. An hour later, every Vorthak military vessel in the system was drifting powerless, their crews stunned but alive, their weapons permanently disabled,